They say small towns are built on trust, on white fences, warm hellos, and quiet promises. But what happens when that trust is twisted, turned into something colder, something cruel? This is the story of a woman who dared to fight back when no one else would, not with banners or shouts, but with quiet resilience. A story about how a simple act, saving rainwater for a dying garden, became a battle for the very soul of a community. In Ridgefield, North Carolina, one voice rose against the silence. And when the storm came, it wasn't just about water anymore. It was about power, corruption, and the kind of courage that doesn't always roar, but never backs down. The courthouse steps were crowded that morning. Elena stood in the chilly air, the weight of months of fear and anger pressing down on her. Around her, neighbors gathered in silent support faces. She hadn't seen at her door in months, now stood beside her, their presence speaking louder than words. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with a low, tense energy. Victor Langston sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by two attorneys in sharp suits. He didn't look smug today. His smile was tight, his fingers tapping nervously against the oak table. Derek Vaughn leaned over and whispered, "Stay steady. No matter what happens, we finish this." The proceedings moved quickly. Elena's heart pounded as Derek presented the case, each word sharp and deliberate. He walked the court through the financial irregularities, the selective enforcement of HOA rules, the mountain of evidence that showed a pattern of abuse and corruption. Photos of unapproved structures owned by Victor's friends flashed onto the court screen. Bank records, whistleblower statements. When Victor took the stand, the mask finally cracked. Under Derek's cross-examination, Victor stumbled. He contradicted himself. Documents Elena had thought would be too subtle, too hidden to matter, became the nails sealing his downfall. Still, there was a moment, a brutal, breathless moment, when Elena's faith almost broke. Victor's lawyer stood and made a dramatic plea, painting Elena as a troublemaker, accusing her of trying to destroy the fabric of a peaceful community for her selfish purposes. He pointed at her rain barrels, claiming they symbolized rebellion against order. "Don." For a second, Elena saw doubt flicker across the judge's face. Fear tightened in her chest. Had she come all this way just to be silenced again? But then Derek rose, holding a thin, crumpled piece of paper, the first HOA warning Elena had ever received. Long before any water barrels, long before the drought. The letter wasn't about water at all. It was about a hand-painted mural Elena had once placed on her fence. A mural celebrating her late husband's life. Victor had ordered it removed. Citing unauthorized modification, the judge took the paper, read it carefully, then looked back at Victor, not with doubt, but with something colder, disgust. The court fell silent. Then the gavel struck. The ruling came down hard and fast. All fines against Elena were nullified, and the HOA was ordered to pay Elena's legal fees, plus damages. An independent audit of Ridgefield Estates' HOA finances was ordered immediately. Victor Langston was referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation on charges of embezzlement and abuse of power. The final blow wasn't delivered by Elena or Derek. It came from the community itself. As Victor was led out of the courtroom, a woman in the crowd, Mrs. Sanderson, who had been fined for her garden, stood up. She didn't yell. She simply turned her back to him, one by one. Every resident followed, silently turning away as Victor passed. By the time he reached the door, it was like he didn't exist. Outside, Elena stepped into the weak afternoon sun. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed, but she barely heard them. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't thinking about victory. She was thinking about the roses blooming along her fence. The small, quiet acts of defiance that built something real. Something that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever truly destroy. Elena smiled, not because the fight was over, but because for the first time in a long time, Ridgefield felt like home again. Elena had never felt fear like this before. Not after losing her husband. Not after moving to a new town alone. This was different, a slow, choking kind of fear. Like vines wrapping tighter around her every day. By the third random inspection of her property, she stopped asking the inspectors for explanations. They came with clipboards and fake smiles, scribbling in silence, recording violations that didn't exist. One afternoon, Elena found her mailbox vandalized, twisted halfway off its post with no witnesses, no suspects, and no help from the HOA security team. The message was clear. You are not welcome here. When Derek Vaughn showed her the financial records and evidence of HOA corruption, a strange mixture of emotions boiled inside her: relief, outrage, and something harder to name: betrayal. This was supposed to be her home. Instead, it had become a battleground. "Are you sure you want to push this?" Derek asked one evening, his voice low. They sat on Elena's back porch. The last light of day bleeding out behind the trees. Victor's cornered. He'll fight dirty. He already is. Elena looked at the rain barrels, lined up like silent sentinels against the house. She thought of the roses, the mural she had painted for her husband, a mural Victor once tried to erase with a single letter. "He already took enough from me." She said, "I'm not letting him take this too." Derek nodded. That was all he needed. They launched the next phase, gathering allies. At first, few dared. Neighbors like the Sandersons and the Kims had their own scars. Years of bullying, fines, silent retaliation. Trust had eroded. Fear still hung over Ridgefield like a heavy fog. But people underestimated the power of shared suffering. At a secret meeting in Elena's backyard, no HOA eyes, no cameras. The first cracks appeared in Victor's wall of control. Stories tumbled out. Mr. Kim's absurd repainting orders. The Sandersons' garden being deemed a health hazard. Mrs. Patel's mailbox being mysteriously smashed, just like Elena's. Each story was another brick pried loose. And then came the break no one expected. Maya Collins, the former HOA secretary, showed up trembling, wringing her hands, clutching a flash drive. "They made me doctor the books," she whispered. "If I help you, will you protect me?" It was the smoking gun. On that drive were HOA emails, financial transfers, secret votes, a web of corruption so dense. Even Derek looked stunned, flipping through it. Victor hadn't just enforced rules selectively. He'd been running Ridgefield like a private empire for years, laundering HOA funds into private contracts with companies he secretly owned. This wasn't about a rain barrel. It was about absolute power, and the fear that losing it would cost Victor everything. Elena realized something else that night. Victor wouldn't just fight back. He would try to destroy her, and Ridgefield would have to choose sides. The air inside the Ridgefield County Courthouse felt thick, almost suffocating. Every seat was filled. The whispering crowd fell into a hush as the judge entered, his black robe flowing like a shadow across the room. Elena sat at the defense table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her stomach twisted in knots, but her face remained calm. She had fought too hard to show fear now. Victor Langston sat just 20 feet away. But to Elena, he seemed smaller today. The arrogance that had once radiated from him was dulled. His expensive suit, his gleaming cufflinks, they looked almost ridiculous against the backdrop of the crumbling empire he'd built on lies. Derek Vaughn rose first, commanding the room with a quiet force. He didn't start with legal jargon. He didn't dive into the financial crimes or the harassment allegations. He told a story. He spoke of Elena Brooks, a widow who simply wanted to save a few drops of rain to keep her garden alive, who followed the law, who loved her home, who believed in her community. He painted a vivid picture of a woman who, when bullied and threatened, chose not to bend, but to fight back for something larger than herself. Then he turned. "And this," Derek said, voice steady, "is the man who tried to destroy her for it." The evidence came crashing down like thunder. Email chains between Victor and the board, bank records showing misappropriated HOA funds, testimonies from residents Victor had targeted, and finally, the flash drive from Maya Collins, the bombshell, that showed Victor had orchestrated fake violations to extort fines from his own neighbors. Victor's defense team scrambled, objected, protested. It didn't matter. Piece by piece, the mask was ripped away. When Victor finally took the stand, sweat beading along his hairline, his answers were clipped, defensive, under cross-examination. Cracks widened into chasms. His explanations grew thinner, more desperate. The turning point came when Derek produced a photograph, a snapshot of Elena's mural, the one she had painted in memory of her husband, the one Victor had ordered destroyed before the rain barrels, before the drought, before any of this. The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't about water. It was about control, about cruelty, about erasing voices that didn't fit Victor's version of Ridgefield. When Elena caught the judge's eye, she saw it, not just professional skepticism, but human anger, disgust. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The judgment was clear. The HOA's fines against Elena were declared void and illegal. The HOA was ordered to pay Elena's legal fees and damages, totaling over $250. Sir, a full criminal investigation into Victor Langston and the HOA leadership was mandated, with immediate removal from their posts. A temporary independent council would oversee Ridgefield Estates until democratic elections could be held. Victor sat frozen, face drained of color, as murmurs filled the room. But the final blow wasn't delivered by the judge, or Derek, or even Elena. It was the community. One by one, residents stood, the Sandersons, Mr. Kim, Mrs. Bull Patel. Even neighbors Elena hadn't known by name. They didn't shout. They didn't boo. They simply turned their backs to Victor as he was escorted out, a wall of silent, irreversible rejection. For once, Victor Langston had no one left to command. Outside the courthouse, sunlight split through the heavy clouds. Elena stood quietly, the noise of reporters and cameras blurring around her. She wasn't thinking about the money, or even the verdict. She thought about the long, lonely nights she had spent doubting herself, about every neighbor who now stood a little taller, about the roses blooming once again along her battered white fence. Derek clapped her gently on the shoulder. "You didn't just win a case," he said. "You changed a town." And for the first time in months, Elena let herself believe it. As she walked down the courthouse steps, she wasn't just Elena Brooks, defendant. She was Elena Brooks, the heart of Ridgefield's new beginning.